What if the most famous rescue in history had scientific explanations that make the miracle even more magnificent? A Hebrew baby in a basket survives crocodile-infested waters to become Israel's greatest leader. Was Moses' salvation divine providence or brilliant maternal strategy? Can God's miraculous protection work through natural laws of physics, psychology, and geography in ways that magnify rather than diminish His power? From the very beginning of creation, God established physical laws that serve as instruments of both judgment and mercy, preservation and destruction. When He spoke light into existence and separated waters from dry land, He wasn't merely creating a stage for human drama, but embedding principles of physics, chemistry, and biology that would become the mechanisms through which His providence operates. The Nile River rescue of Moses demonstrates how divine sovereignty works through the natural systems God designed: hydrodynamics, material science, animal behavior, and human psychology, to accomplish seemingly impossible preservation. Water, the same element that brought judgment through Noah's flood, became the vehicle of deliverance for the future deliverer of Israel. The physical properties of water that God established during creation, its density, buoyancy, surface tension, and thermal characteristics, made it possible for a properly constructed vessel to protect and transport a vulnerable infant. Archaeological evidence reveals that ancient Egyptians possessed sophisticated knowledge of boat construction and waterproofing techniques using bitumen and pitch, the same materials mentioned in Moses' basket construction. The papyrus reeds that grew abundantly along the Nile possessed natural characteristics that made them ideal for basketry: lightweight, flexible, naturally water-resistant when properly prepared, and readily available to Hebrew slaves. God's creation of these specific plants with these exact properties wasn't coincidental but providential preparation for the moment when they would save the future liberator of His people. The Nile's seasonal flooding patterns, which brought both life and danger to Egypt, created the specific water conditions that would carry Moses to safety while making his discovery plausible rather than suspicious. Even the crocodiles and hippopotamuses that made Nile waters deadly had behavioral patterns that God established during creation: territorial habits, feeding schedules, and responses to human presence that could be predicted and avoided by those who understood their nature. The convergence of all these natural elements at precisely the right moment reveals divine orchestration working through the very laws of nature that God embedded in creation from the beginning. Throughout Scripture, God consistently accomplishes miraculous preservation through natural means that demonstrate both His sovereignty over creation and His intimate knowledge of the systems He established. Noah's Ark succeeded because God provided specific engineering instructions that follow principles of naval architecture, material science, and animal psychology that ensured survival during the flood judgment. Abraham's rescue of Lot from Sodom involved military strategy, geographical knowledge, and timing that reflected both human planning and divine guidance working together for deliverance. Joseph's preservation in Potiphar's house and later in prison involved psychological dynamics, economic circumstances, and political developments that appeared natural yet served divine purposes for Israel's eventual salvation. David's escapes from Saul repeatedly involved geographical advantages, weather conditions, and human decision-making that created opportunities for survival that seemed coincidental yet followed patterns of divine protection. Daniel's survival in the lion's den may have involved divine influence over animal behavior, but the mechanism could have included natural factors like feeding schedules, den conditions, or neurological responses that God orchestrated for protective purposes. In each case, miraculous deliverance works through existing natural systems rather than bypassing them completely, demonstrating that God's power is magnified rather than diminished when it operates through the laws He created. The Moses rescue follows this biblical pattern perfectly. Every element appears natural and explainable through scientific analysis, yet occurs with timing and coordination that reveals supernatural orchestration. Jochebed's knowledge of basket construction, the Nile's water conditions, Pharaoh's daughter's bathing schedule, Miriam's positioning for observation, and the discovery timing all involved natural human actions and environmental factors. However, the convergence of these elements at precisely the right moment to save the future deliverer of Israel demonstrates divine providence working through natural means. The miracle isn't diminished by scientific explanation, but magnified when we realize the complexity of natural systems that God coordinated simultaneously to accomplish His redemptive purposes through apparently ordinary circumstances. The successful rescue of baby Moses involved multiple natural laws operating in perfect coordination, fluid dynamics that kept the basket afloat, materials engineering that maintained waterproof integrity, weather patterns that provided calm water conditions, and animal behavior that avoided predatory encounters. Modern survival science reveals the precise conditions necessary for infant survival in hostile environments, making Moses' preservation even more remarkable when analyzed scientifically. Hypothermia threatens infants within hours in water environments. Yet the timing of Moses' placement and discovery occurred within the narrow window necessary for survival. The basket's construction using bitumen and pitch created waterproofing that followed established principles of ancient shipbuilding technology, demonstrating that Jochebed possessed knowledge and resources that seemed impossible for a Hebrew slave woman. Archaeological discoveries revealed that bitumen was readily available in certain Nile Delta regions due to natural seepage from underground deposits, suggesting that divine providence provided both materials and knowledge precisely when needed. The buoyancy calculations for Moses' basket revealed that the materials and construction techniques described in Scripture would indeed support an infant S-weight while maintaining stability in flowing water. River current analysis shows that the Nile cess flow patterns during flood season would naturally carry floating objects toward the palace area where Pharaoh's daughter regularly bathed, making the discovery location predictable rather than miraculous coincidence. Predator behavior studies indicate that crocodiles and hippopotamuses typically avoid areas of regular human activity during daylight hours, creating natural safety zones that experienced locals would recognize and utilize. The psychological factors involved in Pharaoh's daughter's response, maternal instincts triggered by infant crying, cultural attitudes toward foundlings, and political considerations about adoption, all followed natural human responses that God designed into human nature for protective purposes. Weather records from ancient Egypt suggest that the optimal conditions for water transportation, calm winds, stable temperatures, and clear visibility occur during predictable seasonal periods that would maximize survival chances. Each natural law operated independently according to its established principles, yet their simultaneous coordination produced the seemingly impossible result of preserving Israel's future deliverer through circumstances that appeared entirely natural to human observers. The engineering principles behind Moses' basket reveal sophisticated understanding of naval architecture and material science that demonstrates either remarkable human ingenuity or divine instruction guiding Jochebed's construction methods. Modern analysis of ancient Egyptian basketry techniques shows that papyrus reed construction required specific weaving patterns, moisture control, and finishing treatments to achieve waterproof integrity necessary for river navigation. The Hebrew text's description of Tebah, the same word used for Noah's Ark, suggests that Moses' basket was more than a simple container, but a carefully engineered survival vessel designed according to divine specifications. Bitumen and pitch waterproofing created multiple layers of protection that followed principles still used in modern marine applications, where petroleum-based sealants provide flexible, durable barriers against water penetration. The basket's size and shape, while not specified in detail, would have required precise calculations to balance buoyancy, stability, and cargo capacity, calculations that seem beyond the knowledge available to Hebrew slaves yet essential for successful navigation. Hydrodynamic analysis reveals that Nile current patterns during flood season create predictable flow channels that would naturally guide floating objects toward palace areas, making the discovery location scientifically predictable rather than miraculous coincidence. The timing of Moses' placement coincided with optimal water conditions, sufficient depth for navigation, manageable current speed, and seasonal patterns that brought palace residents to riverside locations regularly. Modern infant survival studies show that newborns can survive several hours in controlled temperature environments without feeding, creating a narrow but adequate window for the rescue sequence described in Scripture. The acoustic properties of infant crying carry specific distances over water depending on atmospheric conditions, suggesting that Moses' cries reached Pharaoh's daughter at precisely the optimal moment for audibility without alerting potential threats. Archaeological evidence from palace excavations reveals that Egyptian royalty maintained regular bathing schedules tied to religious observances and court protocols, making their riverside presence predictable to observant locals like Miriam. The basket's construction materials, papyrus, bitumen, and pitch, were all naturally available in the Nile Delta region, yet their combination required specific knowledge and access that suggests divine provision of both resources and expertise precisely when needed for Israel's future deliverance. Contemporary rescue operations and survival science confirm the same principles demonstrated in Moses' Nile rescue, showing how divine protection continues operating through natural mechanisms in modern contexts while maintaining the same miraculous timing and coordination. Coast Guard water rescue statistics reveal that successful infant survival in water environments requires precise coordination of materials, timing, environmental conditions, and human response, exactly the elements present in Moses' rescue. Modern basket boat construction in various cultures demonstrates that the techniques described in Exodus remain viable for river navigation, with indigenous peoples worldwide still using similar materials and methods for water transportation. Search and rescue operations consistently show that successful outcomes depend on factors like weather conditions, water temperature, current patterns, and response timing that mirror the natural elements involved in Moses' preservation. Adoption psychology research reveals that cross-cultural infant adoption often involves emotional responses and protective instincts that transcend social barriers, explaining Pharaoh's daughter's immediate attachment to Moses despite ethnic and political tensions. Child survival studies in crisis situations show that infants possess remarkable resilience when basic needs are met, suggesting that Moses' basket provided adequate protection for the duration of his river journey. Modern survival equipment design incorporates the same principles used in Moses' basket: waterproof construction, buoyant materials, protective enclosure, and visible, audible location aids that attract rescue attention. Emergency response protocols emphasize the importance of positioning and timing that parallel Miriam's strategic observation post and intervention in connecting Moses with appropriate care. Contemporary refugee and immigration experiences often involve protective measures by parents who place children in dangerous situations with hope of rescue, demonstrating the same desperate faith that motivated Jochebed's actions. Medical research on infant hypothermia and dehydration reveals the narrow survival windows that make Moses' successful rescue even more remarkable when analyzed scientifically. Modern communication and transportation technologies accomplish the same protective purposes as Miriam's human intelligence network, showing how divine providence adapts to available resources in each historical period. The consistency of these patterns across cultures and centuries suggests that God, as protective mechanisms, work through universal features of human nature and physical law, rather than culture-specific supernatural interventions. Despite remarkable advances in engineering, psychology, and environmental science, the ultimate mystery of Moses' rescue lies not in the individual mechanisms involved, but in their perfect coordination and timing that served God as a larger redemptive plan for Israel and humanity. We can analyze the hydrodynamics of basket navigation, the material science of waterproof construction, the behavioral psychology of adoption responses, and the environmental factors that enabled survival. Yet the convergence of all these elements at precisely the right moment transcends natural probability. Modern chaos theory and complexity science reveal how small changes in complex systems can produce dramatically different outcomes, making the successful coordination of multiple variables for Moses' rescue statistically improbable, though not impossible. The deeper mystery involves how this rescue served purposes that extended far beyond infant survival, positioning Moses for Egyptian education, Hebrew identity preservation, and leadership development that would enable Israel's liberation centuries later. Contemporary believers experience similar mysteries when divine protection operates through circumstances that appear natural, yet occur with timing and coordination that suggest supernatural involvement beyond statistical likelihood. The challenge lies in maintaining faith in divine providence while acknowledging the sophisticated, natural mechanisms through which God often works, neither dismissing scientific understanding nor limiting divine power to only obviously supernatural manifestations. Moses' rescue demonstrates that God's most profound miracles may be those that work so seamlessly through natural systems that they appear almost ordinary, except to eyes of faith that recognize the divine orchestration behind seemingly coincidental circumstances. This hidden quality of providential intervention preserves human freedom and natural order while accomplishing divine purposes that span generations and cultures. The scientific analysis of Moses' rescue reveals the incredible complexity and precision of natural systems that God embedded in creation, making his sovereignty more rather than less remarkable when we understand the mechanisms he employs. Modern science continues discovering new layers of complexity in biological, psychological, and physical systems that demonstrate the divine intelligence behind natural law, while confirming that human understanding remains limited compared to the infinite wisdom that coordinates all natural processes for redemptive purposes. Moses' rescue reveals divine miracles working through the very natural laws God created, from water physics to human psychology. Science explains the mechanisms, but cannot account for their perfect timing and coordination. When natural law serves supernatural purposes, we glimpse the master engineer behind both miracle and method. Could our own coincidental deliverances be more providential than we realize?